Had the pleasure and the luck of working for KISS for 25 years now. I didn't want to do this tonight because I'm speaking in front of people, but it's about Alive. And we joked earlier today, all my friends, that I would not know any of my friends, either professional friends or just my friends, if it wasn't for the album Alive. So I had to do this. I wanted to do it. I'm going to introduce Jeff Fuhrer from Universal Music. Jeff, a lot of you guys don't know, unless you read the liner notes, but Jeff is very responsible for a lot of the projects we all love. The anniversary release sets, the box sets, picture discs, he's known Universal. We worked with him, right? 2011? All the way back.
That's about right, yeah.
And so Jeff is obviously very involved in everything that comes out, and he's going to tell you a little bit behind the scenes. And obviously we have the great Eddie Kramer here. Eddie Kramer, Eddie, we love you. As a KISS fan, again, you're part of that. We would not be here. He produced, as you probably know, the original KISS demo, Alive 1, Rock and Roll Over, Love Gun, Alive 2, Alive 3, and he was involved in the box set releases. So I can't think of anyone better to have. We wish you were here, Eddie, but here we go, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming out. My name is Jeff Fuhrer. I'm the VP of A&R at Universal Music Enterprises. We are the catalog division of Universal Music Group. And as Keith said, around 2011, one of my predecessors and mentors left the company, and the company came to me and said, "Do you want to start working on the Keith's catalog?" And I said, "Hell yeah." And so since then, we've been, just doing a flurry of projects and releases, and over the years, and just having a great time celebrating this band's iconic catalog. And then, as of right now, that led us to these two massive projects that we got to release this year. 50th anniversary of Dress to Kill and the 50th anniversary of Alive.
Yeah!
And so basically, where do we want to start?
So we want to give you a little bit. I know a lot of KISS fans write into us and a lot of different things about you love to see what happens behind the scenes. I mean, everybody loves the finished product, but I don't know if you really know what goes on. Jeff's a huge part of that. So I wanted to start. We're going to touch on Dress to Kill just a little bit.
Yeah, start there. We'll trickle into that as well.
I love it, yeah, of course. But so when you when we decide whether it's with Pop House or with KISS, or when you decide on an actual anniversary release, Dress to Kill, where do you start?
I mean, basically, it's the initial concept of what do we have in front of us, what's going on. It's usually around April, May, June that our company starts looking forward to the next year. So it's like, okay, so in 2024, I moved in 2025 is the 50th anniversary of Dress to Kill and Alive. So I knew we were going to do something with Dress to Kill, we were going to make it happen. But unfortunately, about 10 years prior to that, in 2015, I had the same general idea that I wanted to celebrate the 40th for Alive, and I knew what the concerts were recorded, as I'm sure most of you knew. Went to our vault, and unfortunately, we couldn't find any of the tapes. We couldn't find the tapes for the actual final Alive album at that moment in time. It just didn't come together. And so, fast forward to November 2024, and I started asking for tapes to be pulled for Dress to Kill from the studio sessions. And I just put in the email, what do you have of these 5 concerts? Wildwood, Cobo Hall, the 2 Davenports, and the Ohio show. And to my surprise, 3 days later, I get this email back saying, we found 4 of the 5 concerts in multi-track form, which are the concerts that you have on the 2 box sets. And in the case of Ohio, unfortunately, we could only find 1 of the 3 reels that were recorded for the show. So that's where that chunk of that content appears as the bonus live disc alongside the Davenport rehearsals. So I get all the transfers done through our studio, and I'm starting to play with all these digital files, and I'm just trying to figure out, is this stuff complete? Can we put this thing together? And then upon, finding a little bit of hiccups here and there, we realized we really do have the whole thing for all 4 of these shows. So then my next phone call is basically to the iconic Eddie Kramer, because I see his name all over these tapes, and I obviously know that he recorded all these shows. I know he went in and worked with the band to make the Alive album the way you guys all have known it for 50 years. And I pick up the phone and I call him after many years of him and I collaborating on the Jimi Hendrix stuff, because there was a time period at Universal where we distributed the Jimi Hendrix catalog. So I got the honor of working with Eddie Kramer on those releases. And it'd been a number of years since we had really worked and talked to one another, but I pick up the phone and I call him and I say, hey, 50 years ago you recorded these 5 concerts. I found the multi-tracks. Do you want to work on them again 50 years later and help me mix them and put them together? And Eddie? And Mr. Eddie Kramer.
Great to see you. Great to see everybody tonight. It's been a long journey. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction explanation of where we are. It's amazing to think it's 50 years past, and just thinking that you had been able to find those tapes, it was such a blast. I was so happy to know that they were in good shape and that we could certainly go back and revisit them and see what we could do. And I'm just thrilled that we were able to do this.
Absolutely, yeah, it was really impressive to go back and listen to these tapes. And in today's atmosphere, these are really good live recordings. But I do understand what the band's perspective was back then in the context of they want to release their first live album. They want to do this right. They want to do this big. They're really in the mindset of making the best thing that they can make. So I don't blame them for what their final decisions were in terms of going in and overdubbing what they did to make this the best recording ever. I think a really important thing here to remind people is this album, this live album, was the live album that literally turned the tide in the music industry. But prior to this live album coming out, the music industry treated live albums sort of similar to greatest hits at the time, which were the last nail in an artist's coffin. They're just sort of trying to milk a little bit more out of an audience as this artist's career is kind of starting to fade away. But Bill Aucoin at the time was a visionary in many ways, in many layers. And he basically saw how the band's studio albums, their album sales were sort of here, but their ticket sales were just skyrocketing, just continuing to grow. And when he sat down with the band and the team at Casablanca and proposed the idea, let's release a live album, it was met with a little bit of resistance, but then when he basically explained to them, hey, my ticket sales are here, but my album sales are here. We're not capturing the sound that the fans are experiencing on stage. We're not getting that energy on these studio albums. And everyone went, let's do it, let's make it happen. And so this album, once it came out, and obviously as we all know, was the first gold album that the band ever got. That's 500,000 sales. They never achieved that status on the first 3 albums. And then a month later, it went platinum. And this was the album that basically told the music industry, at least the rock industry, live albums are now a commodity. Live albums are now a next step for an artist's career. Soon afterwards, you got Frampton Comes Alive that comes out. You've got Leonard Skinner, One More from the Road. You've got Led Zeppelin's Song Remains the Same. You've got Cheap Trick in Japan, and so forth and so forth. All of these iconic live albums that we love today possibly may not have happened if it wasn't for Kiss Alive.
So I have a question, just for Eddie. Obviously we're doing more on the box set now, we want to get into that, but back then, you introduced the first demo, and then now you're coming along to Cruise Alive. And I know the answer to this, but I want you to just respond. Could you have any idea of the magnitude of the project you were working on? As pertaining to Kiss, and also, like Jeff said, just rock and roll. I mean, just the live albums of the 70s that you started at, or was it just another project you were excited to work on? You know what I mean? What was the mind frame back when you were actually recording it?
Well, it was a challenge, and I loved the challenge. When Neil Bogart called me up one day, and he said, we want to do a Kiss live album. What do you think? And I said, give me a couple of minutes, I'll call you right back. And I hung up the phone, and then I was on my desk in front of me was the prototype album of Boston from Tom Schultz. And I called up Tom Schultz and I said, Tom, do the album the way you have it. It's brilliant. I can't add anything to that. It's a genius, right? Hung up the phone, called him back, Neil, and said, Neil, I'm going to do it. I love a challenge. And you just imagine, I'd seen Kiss, I'd watched their shows in the beginning, saw them when they first went to the hotel to commit. I talked to Bill McCoy about the band, and I was fantastic as entertainment, and their musical chops were growing radically fast. And the fact that they had, from what I remember, when they went on tour for those first year and a half, 2 years, they saturated the East Coast of America and the Midwest, and they had about 300,000 fans. I think, you know, between Bill and Neil, they kind of knew we might sell 250, maybe 300,000, but when it jumped to gold so fast, we knew we were onto something. It was amazing. But the challenge of actually getting them in particular arenas and the concert halls and recording them live, that was quite a fantastic experience, I have to tell you. Hilarious at times, many crazy stories.
So, obviously you mentioned about what you dating.
Yeah, so let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to the Dress to Kill. So basically, I started going through the Dress to Kill studio tapes from Larrabee Studios, Larrabee Sound, I think it's called, and the Electric Lady tapes where they actually did the final recordings. And I'm starting to piece things together and having some fun with it. We've got mixtapes, we've got multi-track tapes. And I'm realizing, oh wow, we got some really great outtakes here. Like the band did a lot of like, you know, outtake recordings, which is where a lot of the instrumental outtakes come from. They just kept practicing and recording the songs until they knew that they had them, but not generally, you know, laying down vocals for them. And then I start going into some of the other multi-tracks, and I realize, like the actual final album, and you know, as Paul has talked about, you know, he really admired BTO and how they did layered electric guitars and acoustic guitars. And when I got down into the multi-track tapes and found these acoustic guitars that are ultimately really buried in the mixes. I mean, once you kind of know they're there, they come out, but there's a lot of times where you just realize that was there the whole time. But until it slaps you in the face, you know, it's not always obvious. And I'm working with David Frangione. I've already hired him I want him to do the Atmos mix for the Dress to Kill album. And I go home and I go, hey, you know, I got these outtakes, you know, from the studio sessions that I need some mixes on. Here are my ideas, and in particular, like there's several tracks, like Come On and Love Me, where there's this acoustic guitar through it, and they go, what if we just stripped away as much of the electric guitar as possible? Can that create a new experience, something that's familiar, but unique? And we have a tendency to call it a stripped mix sometimes, but I just didn't feel like that was the right, you know, moniker for it in this particular case. But so we call it the alternate mix. And so we started having fun with what we had, right? And we start realizing that we've got all of this great, unique stuff that we can put together. And that's what made up, you know, the studio bonus material that we had. Then naturally, I've been working with Bernie Grunman for a very long time, and I talked to him and I'm like, hey, I want you to remaster the record for us. I want you to master the material. And so, you know, he obviously does that stuff. But then, like I said earlier, when we got into the live tapes, now I'm looking at 4 concerts. 4 concerts that, generally speaking, have the same set list. And, you know, would it be amazing to have one giant box set for live? But if you really look at the content, we're talking like 12, 13, 14 LP discs, which is just, that's a lot. That's really heavy. But I still didn't have any solid live material for Dress to Kill. And this is the Dress to Kill tour that's been recorded. So in my head, I'm going, okay, I've got 2 shows from Davenport, an early show and a late show. So that's a no-brainer. Let's split those apart. Cobo Hall show was the first show in the run of shows that were recorded. That was May 16th. So yes, let's drop that show on Dress to Kill, Davenport 1. And then we've got all this bonus studio material. Next thing you know, we've got 8 LPs and 5 CDs of material. And I'm like, there you go, there's Dress to Kill. That's solid. So then my next steps is I reach out to Tom Drummond at T42 Design, and we reach out to Ken Sharp, and I explain to him we have this project. And we basically, and they're anticipating it. We've probably had conversations even before this, and I know they're probably doing some preliminary research, but those two guys really, truly deserve a round of applause, because what they do to pull together the graphics and the imagery and the memorabilia and everything they do is really bar none. They are really amazing. And I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here, but is there anyone here who participated with Tom Drummond or Ken Sharp? You know, you know, we appreciate the fan input that those guys reach out to, and they get their hands on a lot of this incredible imagery, and posters and tickets and flyers and whatever else is all in there that is not coming to mind right now. But you know, then they present to me what they've discovered, and we just start basically figuring out, okay, we've already established the footprint of these boxes with the Destroyer 45th that we did. We knew where we wanted to go with this, and then we followed up that with the 40th anniversary of Creatures of the Night in a very similar fashion. So we knew we had a footprint, and this was falling right into that footprint, and we realized, you know, we're starting to create a series here, and this is really exciting. It's very amazing. And so, you know, we start piecing it together, we start working with all of our vendors, we start piecing it in. Next thing you know, we've got this incredible project. Well, also in the background, I know I'm still, you know, basically also telling them, hey, guess what? We now have an Alive 50th set. And of course, Tom was like, and when do we want all of this to be released? And I'm like, well, based on our timelines and what it takes to put this together, we need these to come out by the end of the year. They might come out a month apart from one another. And we went, all right, let's do this. And this was a solid, you know, 8 months of relentless work, just absolutely, you know, pushing through with it and just discovering everything that we could discover about this stuff. And when Ken Sharp started, you know, delivering his liner notes for us, you know, I think one of these is somewhere around 28,000 words or something like that, and maybe both of them are at this point. You know, you start reading it, and now I start reading a little bit more of the history behind all this stuff, and it just really starts to amp you up. And you know, then I get to sit there and talk to my company about like this history bit, this factoid, that factoid, and all of a sudden the troops start rallying, and we just realize we're going to blow something out of the water here. And yeah.
So at that point, when you obviously, and some of you, if you don't know, like Tom Drummond has been working with KISS for probably 20 years at least. We've done things with him. You've probably seen his name in any of the releases that have come out, and also on the tour books. Every time we put a tour book together, we do the same thing. We reach out to friends like Mark Ciccini and other people that are here that give us posters and things for the tour books. So just so you guys know what we're talking about, we know these guys very well, so we know what it is. And then Ken Sharp, you've seen him. He wrote for the KISS, official KISS magazine. He's done
many
books, he's done all
books,
kinds of stuff. There's so many, and huge KISS fans, so it's great. So at this point, you got the collection coming together as far as the actual box set, the ancillary pieces, all that kind of stuff. And then you get Eddie to agree. Then what happens?
So I trade the files over to Eddie, and he starts going through them and doing his part to feed back to me what challenges are we going to come across. And I think one of the fun ones that'll be a fun story to tell Eddie is Eddie calls me up and he goes, "We got a problem." He goes, and I think it was the Kobo show, but correct me if I'm wrong on that, Eddie. He goes, and this is like the third, maybe fourth song in the set, which the name escapes me at the moment. I'm sure you can chime in here. And he goes, "This song's bass guitar is completely out of tune. Gene performed with an out of tune guitar." He goes, "I can fix this." And this is an example of how in 1975, as they're recording these shows, why the band made the decision to go and overdub and perform these tracks live in a studio environment to make the best possible live. Because here's a band that's putting everything they have on stage for their paying audience. They've got fireballs blasting all around them. They've got smoke coming out of Ace Frehley's guitar. You know, they've got sweat going everywhere. They're in high heels and makeup and all these in their costumes. At the end of the day, they have an electrifying performance, but that doesn't normally translate to a good quality live recorder. Not one that they really wanted to release as an official live album. And so, basically, Gene's guitar is out of tune, and in '75, you can't do anything with that, with the equipment that they had at that time. But fast forward 50 years later, with Pro Tools and all the digital tools that we have, we can now address these issues. But live in an analog studio, that's just something you're not going to be able to tackle, along with a bunch of other challenges that are associated with this stuff. But we can do a lot more now. And so Eddie calls me up and tells me about this, and he goes, look, I can fix the bass guitar, I can retune it, but the challenge here is the bass guitar was bled into the other microphones, like the drum microphones and some of the amplifier microphones. I can't retune that without altering the actual instrument that's being recorded. And so I basically tell Eddie, I said, hold my beer. And I take the multi-tracks, and with the exception of the 2 tracks that were recorded for the bass, I send the rest of the multi-tracks off to one of my studios, and I say, with this new technology we have, we can take a stereo audio track like you're listening to on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your music, and we can literally, what we call stem or extract the vocals, the guitars, the bass, and any of the instruments that are basically on a particular track, we can isolate those into a multi-track form now. And basically, I took these multi-tracks and did that. I told my engineers, remove the bass guitar that you're hearing from these other tracks and send me that audio back without the bass. I then send that off to Dr. Eddie and say, this is what we did. And he goes, give me a minute. And he basically does what Eddie does, and he retunes the bass guitar, mixes it all together, and we were able to salvage a track that, in his opinion, when he first called me, said, we're gonna have to lose this track. And I said, no, we're not. This is what we're gonna do.
And it's really a tribute to modern technology, because this is AI in its format that we can use. I mean, the Beatles have used it, as we heard Paul McCartney do what he's done with Lennon and all of that. But here's a grand opportunity for us to use the latest technology, embrace it. Let's see if we can fix this. And once I heard those tracks and I put the bass up against it, we were in. It was great. I mean, the song sounds amazing now, and it's a tribute to the team. And this is a critical thing. When you're working on a project like this, you have to have a team that respects each other, that depend on each other, and definitely make things exciting for you. Oh, wow, you can do that? Well, check this out. This is what we're going to do. And quite frankly, without that team, this project would never have happened. It's brilliant.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, it's incredible what the technology allows us to do these days. Yeah, and so, then, yeah, so I mean, that's yeah.
So Eddie, back to you, just as a, a novice, know nothing about engineering, producing, any of that, KISS fan. When Jeff calls you, tells you what he has, you obviously did the original. What are you looking at that point? Are you looking for something that wasn't, released back then, or something that couldn't have been included, like you said, where you fixed the song, or you're just looking at it as a brand new project almost?
Well, here's the interesting thing. When you hear all of the various outtakes, and some of them are quite fantastic, because God bless Gene's insistence every day when they were in a venue, they would get in the afternoon and do a rehearsal, and that rehearsal would be taped because they had the truck ready to go. And he insisted, keep the damn doors closed, don't let anybody in, we're rehearsing, because they were perfectionists. Gene and Paul were perfectionists, and they wanted to make sure that the band was tight and that the songs were going to sound correct. And some of these rehearsals were absolutely brilliant and funny too, because there would be breakdowns and Gene would be convincing with the road crew. It all makes for a beautiful documentary. And the fans, I guarantee you, when you hear this stuff, you're gonna enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah, was some great stage banter of Gene just, shut the hell up, we're trying to do a recording here. You've got, you know, guys moving boxes around and stuff like that and making a bunch of noise. And you know, this is in particular is the Davenport show, so that's after Kobo. And I think they'd gotten to a point where they recognized at Kobo that they wanted a couple of the songs they knew were going to go on this live album, but the recording at Kobo just wasn't what they wanted it to be. And so they were like, hey, let's re-perform this without an audience, without all the jumping around, without all the fireballs going off and everything. And so they attempted, and I think some of that was used in the final Alive thing here or there, you know, but ultimately, you know, obviously the guys came in and did what they did to really make a live album that stands out.
I just want to jump in and tell fans and everybody who are listening that when we mixed at Electric Lady Studios at that time, trying to correct guitar parts, not too many guitar parts, but maybe Gene's based on one or two small things, but mostly vocals and things like that, because, you know, when Paul was really pushing his voice and, you know, doing that for 2 or 3 days or 4 days, having him concentrated back to back, and they were working hard, he would lose his voice. So come into the studio, we put the big speakers up, and I set it up with the same microphones that they used in the live recording, in the live recording itself. Back in the studio, we created what it sounded like on the stage, and that gave me the inspiration to do the overdubs. And I think, you know, at that time, people were saying, well, it doesn't matter, you know, it's cool. If you've got to fix something, fix something. I know Peter Frampton did it on the live album. I did a whole chunk of that. Peter would fix stuff because you wanted to make sure that that album sounded great.
100%.
So at this process, like, how long do you take on a box set like this, from everything from you starting all the way to Eddie?
So conceptualizing it was one thing, then that takes weeks and even sometimes a couple of months for the business side of what I do behind the scenes before I kind of give it the green light and move forward. But ultimately, I know I'm going to be given the green light. It's Kiss. Everyone wants a new Kiss project. It was literally the end of November of 2024 when I reached out to my vault and said, I need to find material based on these parameters. And so it's from November 2024 till, when did we wrap this up? Probably June, July this year. Yeah.
So when you go initially, like, you don't know you're going to find these tapes, right? So what do you just, you put a budget together and you just say, hey, we're detective work?
I don't put a budget together until I know what I have. So first it's just the idea, and then the company's like, hey, okay, yeah, we're going to support this idea. It obviously makes sense commercially, you know, and all this stuff, and it's the right thing to do, especially since we've got these other 2 boxes that we've done, and we've been really successful with them. But yeah, no, once I found the material, then it's like, okay, I'm calling up Eddie and I'm talking to him, I'm like, okay, yeah, how much is this going to cost me? I'm calling up Dave Frangione, I'm doing the same thing, and then I'm putting it together, and, you know, yeah, then we just move forward, and and then what was it? I think it was, because this was right before the holidays that we've kind of solidified this is what we're going to do, but it's the holidays, so it's like, okay, and then we're going to get back in action. When did you officially start? Was it January?
Yeah.
It was late January. I think it was late January, right? Yeah.
And it took, I think, I counted the number of days, I believe it was 46 days of mixing.
To do 4 shows in the rehearsals and
And Adobe Atmos as well.
Right, and yeah, so then, I think I might have failed to mention this, so in addition to the concerts being found at the vault at the exact same time, we found the original multi-tracks for Alive itself, the actual final album master. So yeah, so that was obviously part of the discussion. It was like, Dolby Atmos is a major part of the industry now. It's going to get more and more popular. We're finding out that that's the average, well, I'm just going to call the average man car, the Chevrolets, the Hondas, the Toyotas of the world. We're anticipating by 2028, those cars are going to start to feature Dolby Atmos playback capabilities in your vehicle. And that's where Atmos is going to shine. Because now you're in a seated environment with speakers surrounded around you. You spend an hour or so a day commuting to here or there, whatever's going on in your life. That's where Atmos is going to explode. And so that's why we keep pushing for this format. But in the meantime, the way to listen to it is obviously through your phones and your earbuds and your headphones, which is what it is. But also we put these Blu-ray discs together. So if you're, an audiophile nut, if you're a music dork, you basically, and you're a movie, aficionado, you have a surround sound system, and you have the ability to play Atmos. And if you don't have Atmos, you have hopefully you have 5.1. Once you mix in Atmos, Atmos is then backwards compatible to play back on the system the way yours is set up. Now, I am of the frame of mind that I hire somebody like Eddie to make an Atmos mix. I want him to deliver me the 5.1 mix as well. And it is derived from the work he did on Atmos, but I would rather trust someone like Eddie to deliver it with the intentions of what we want it to sound like versus your Atmos amplifier and however you've set it up to then create the 5.1 mix out of it. It's just the nuance of mine of wanting to make sure you're getting what we intend for you to listen to. Obviously, I can't control how you have your system set up and what your volume levels of your speakers are and stuff like that. But what we've put in front of you is what we feel is the best representation of this album and surround sound.
So this is a question for both of you, actually. So let's start with Jeff. You talk about we go out and find these things. You know what I mean? Is that just like do you have any idea where you're going?
That is the coolest goddamn part of my job, okay? The fact that I don't necessarily get to touch the tapes because most of them are located under a mountain in Pennsylvania called, if you're familiar with the Iron Mountain Company, there's literally a mountain called Iron Mountain. Yep. And it used to be a government bunker back in the Cold War that the US government used to store all their stuff and all this stuff. But once the Cold War ended, they realized they kind of didn't really need this facility anymore, so they started privatizing it. And majority of the major players, Sony Music, us, Warner Brothers, I'm sure in some way, shape, or form, the film companies, this place is 100% temperature controlled naturally by the earth because it's under a mountain. With very little energy. They basically, I think, just need lighting and electricity to operate their equipment, and that's where all of our tapes are. So what they do is they send me pictures of the tape boxes with the digital transfers, and I just get to play with this stuff, and it's a lot of fun.
You probably don't even know what's there, right? I mean, until you start digging into it.
Well, no, we have a database of stuff, and so that's how this found, and stuff gets obviously updated all the time, which for whatever reason 10 years ago, we couldn't find it, right? I don't know what happened. I don't know if the person at the time just didn't insert the right information, didn't do a good enough job. I unfortunately had to trust that he couldn't find it. It is what it is. Because I don't have control over walking into some place and going, no, this is where it's going to be, right? And the reality
Jeff, I have to say something there. Ace Frehley would say, it was anime. It wasn't that. It was this spooky kind of feeling, and you go inside a mountain, man, and it's so scary, and that's what's going to happen to our tapes. It's all going to go wonky and stuff. And he says, until the angel comes down and just says, boy, let's get this tape out of here. It's been in there long enough. Come on. God bless Ace Frehley. I have to throw something in about this.
Ask another question later. So anyway, so back to that. So Jeff digs in, finds all this stuff. Back in 1975, I mean, is this just normal, the amount of stuff that you have recorded and the things that you can end up finding? Or is that just something that you guys planned ahead to have a lot of, things when you were trying to put the first album together?
I don't think we were that lucky in those days. I think Jeff has this enviable job of finding these beautiful masters, which we had that kind of cooperation with the record companies in those days.
Yeah, the catalog business really didn't start until the 90s. That's when they started, but especially with CDs. And they start, when CDs first came out, they just took the vinyl masters and just crammed everything they can onto a CD. But then the remastering phase came out. Like, oh wait a minute, we have to do this a little bit better. Like, this was just the EQ'd vinyl master just put on a CD disc, right? Hey, let's actually properly master this thing for the CD spec and make it right. And that's when the remastering thing came out, and that's when the discovery of tapes. It's like, hey, guess what? We can do this box set, we can do this rarities collection, we can do, a career retrospective, we can do a greatest hits with this bonus track or that bonus track, and stuff like that.
So that was another one. So I've been reading a recent article on other bands that try to do projects like this, and they just don't have anything. They didn't record anything extra. Was KISS different back then, or is that normal
KISS
back
is
then?
definitely highly prolific, and I applaud them for that. I'm very fortunate that I get to see the archive of what the band personally controlled prior to the partnership with Pop House, which, you know, that same database is what I dived into. And I'm just like, I just start line iteming things and send it off to the powers that be and say, hey, can you get me this, can you get me that, so I can check it out and figure out, do we have something here that we can play around with. But yeah, between that and our own archive, and then sometimes it's fans. I mean, the fans sometimes unearth these things as well. They get their hands on it, and we can't find a better way to do it. I mean, there's been live recordings before that we've done, and I forget which one specifically, but we ended up getting well, no, actually, I don't know if this is necessarily a fan-based one, but we found this stereo soundboard recording of this live show. And, you know, Paul's vocals were a little bit buried on it and stuff like that, but like as I mentioned earlier, through the technology of AI and how we can extract all the individual things, we were able to break it down to its basic tracks, and then we were able to boost up stuff like Paul's vocal or Gene's bass and stuff like that, and actually make the live recording sound the way that we want to do it, or we want to release it, you know, type deal. And that's actually the impetus of the Off the Soundboard series that we release. You know, these aren't necessarily the live concerts like, you know, Cobo Hall or Wildwood on this particular set, because we have full multi-tracks and can really, you know, put together what we did. But these are legitimate recordings that are great live recordings. So let's put together a series that celebrates that and allows fans to have fun with this stuff that's out there. And the thing that honestly surprised me the most when we really got into these particular two projects was none of these 5 shows were bootlegged. That blew my mind a little bit. You know, the fact that no fan, based on the knowledge that I have, based on the research that I could find, and the fans that I know that collect this band rapidly, I'm like, how are these shows not bootlegged? And they weren't. Somehow these recordings just didn't get out there in the world, because that happens, unfortunately. One engineer gets a hold of it, he shares it with his buddy, then his buddy shares it with another, and so forth. And that's where, you know, the bootleg, you know, world comes into play. But, you know, we didn't have that here, and really, it made it that much more special to realize we're going to be putting something together here that's a gargantuan celebration of 2 iconic albums. You know, and especially, you know, that of what Alive is, based on what I said at the beginning of all this, of how it changed the live, you know, album, you know, perspective in the music industry.
And KISS.
Yeah, I mean, it literally was the most, it set them on a whole other trajectory, you know, that set them up for Destroyer, which was another giant trajectory upwards, and then just so forth and so forth, as I know many of you guys know, and why you guys are sitting and celebrating this band at a hotel, taking over a hotel, and just celebrating the music.
Eddie, so obviously you've been a legendary producer for so long. When Jeff gets to you and tells you what he has, is it like Christmas Day? Are you excited to jump back in? There's so much stuff?
Yeah, you know, it was exciting. What's that?
I said, how giddy were we? We were so giddy.
We were, I mean, it was joyous. It was crazy great. We went, yes! Now we really dig into something that will make the fans happy, make us all happy, because, you know, it's like an archaeological dig, you know, where you dig down and then you see the first layer of dirt and you scrape that away, and you bring it back and put more. Oh, wait a minute, that's Ace's guitar, and it's really good up to this point. All you have to do is fix this little bit here, right there. And it was like making a big composition of all of the elements that in the end is just crazy great. I mean, when I listened, you know, I first started listening again to, say, the Wildwood tapes, I was immediately, the moment I put the file up and I opened up the room sound and I realized that was a small room. It was only 1,200 people could get in that room, but it was packed. And it made the sound really, it felt quite dead, actually. It wasn't like Cobo Hall, you know, 14,000 people or whatever. But this was an intimate club in New Jersey, at the bottom end of New Jersey, And it was hilarious. The crowd was just bombed out of their heads. It was the middle of summer, everybody was sweating. And there's so many crazy stories about this particular show, which is in a book that I'm kind of writing about my whole life and stuff. But, you know, I can tell you stories all day about this stuff.
There's got to be one good nugget you can give us.
All right, okay. Jeff, you know this story, right? The one I'm going to tell you about.
Tell it.
That evening at 7 o'clock. All right.
You probably told it to me, but I'm not remembering.
All right, so imagine, here's a club, jammed to the gills. It's 7 o'clock at night. I went round the back to the office, and there's Gene, Paul, the whole band sitting there, and Bill Coyne. And Bill is yelling at this manager, agent, whoever he was running the joint. And Bill says, now look, I have to just say one word on stage that Kiss is not going on tonight, and you know what's going to be left of your facility? Nothing. Where's my cash? And he was, within like 2 minutes, as I ran out and grabbed this big bag of cash and gave it to him and said, okay, they go on, please put them on.
Yeah, money talks and bullshit walks. But yeah, you gotta give props to Bill. I mean, he has to protect his artists. They're there to do what they did. Yep, and you did tell me that one, and that was a good one for sure.
You still, I mean, you've been doing this so long. You go through the project, you do, the best you can on it. You're excited about it. Are you still excited when you hear the feedback, especially from Gene and Paul, about how much they like these releases?
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, 50 years, actually, it's even more because I remember before they were even Kiss, I would say to kind of, working at Electric Lady, they would come up and down the hallway and we'd say hi, whatever. And they had their first album, which went straight in the bloody toilet. We know all about that. And then I got the opportunity to do a demo with them, which got them their record deal. And from that point on, we had a really good relationship. Gene and Paul, we've been friendly over the years. And then, of course, when the live album hit, it just snowballed. And from there into the solo, I feel like I'm part of that family. And I hope the fans enjoy what we have done as a family. This is a good bunch of folks who really appreciate each other. And hey, what can you say about Gene and Paul and the band? They're pretty.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's a great tie-in. I wanted, over the years, I've been lucky enough to work with these guys, but also become friends with them. And I was very good friends with Ace. And one thing, obviously, you mentioned earlier, and I wanted not to put you on the spot, but to see, even during the recording of Alive or anything, his solo record, Trouble Walking, anything you worked on. I just want to say, because he told me many times and told my friends many times that you were his favorite producer, that you were his mentor, and that you were his dear friend. He said that to us many times. And, I just wanted to see if you had some special story or just something in general about Ace, obviously.
Yes, hey, Curly, how you doing? And he did say something which I can't really say now because it's a little rude, but I better not. I think we will say that one. But let me give you a story that is pretty cool, and I think you guys will enjoy this. So we're doing his solo album. Now, Ace at that time was feeling a little bit insecure. We're at Plaza Sound in New York City, and we're about to do one of his first vocals. And Ace says, hey man, Curry, I can't stand up, I gotta lie down. So, okay, we gave him a pillow, put it behind his head, he's lying on the floor. I gave him a 57 to sing into. Okay, Curry, start like that. Okay, when you feel a little better, you can maybe stand up a bit. So he goes through the first track, and we record it. It's not bad. Hey, Carl, you feeling a little stronger now? Yeah, Carl, I'm a fine shot, no problem. Okay, and as he started singing, we kept doing like 4, 5, 6, or 7 more performances. I'm feeling better. Now he's sitting up, and I gradually, by the time he did the final vocal, he was standing up, holding onto a mic stand for dear life, and singing, and that's that's when he felt really comforted. Yay, Curly, we love you.
So guys, I appreciate you too. So we've got into the last 15 minutes. What we wanted to open up to the crowd and take some questions. If you guys are good with it, Jeff. Yep. Do we have a mic out here? Somebody roaming around with us? Hey, first of all, we have any questions?
Mike's floating around there.
Right over here.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you for the Atmos. I love those Atmos mixes. Hotter than hell. Is there anything you can do? Hotter than hell. Is there anything we can do to clean up that muddy sound? A lot of people complain about it. It's my favorite album. It's just a question about that.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. I mean, it's not one that we've put our intentions to work on in the near future because we've just sort of passed that 50th anniversary, right? And unfortunately, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the band and Pop House, you know, were going through their deal terms basically, and everything just kind of had to ground to a halt naturally and understandably. The band wanted to preserve as much value of their catalog and everything. So, you know, we unfortunately missed that, but we will definitely at some point, you know, be able to go back in and maybe, yeah, have some fun, you know, playing with a new stereo mix and stuff like that. Because, yeah, we've had plenty of projects. I was almost about to reveal one that hasn't even been revealed yet. Yeah, it's not Kiss related, but yeah, we do this a lot where we'll, you know, if we listen to an album and we feel like a new stereo mix could be fun, we don't even want to get rid of the original stereo mix for the purist, for the diehard, for the person that loves what it was. But, you know, let's add a new mix to the equation because there are fans out there that appreciate that. And there are times where, yeah, an album does have its limitations based off of, you know, maybe when it was made, you know, maybe who put it together, whatever the dynamic is. But yeah, you know, we can definitely, you know, visit something like that.
I think Ace would have said, hey, and clean up on aisle 7. Let's get this record sounding better. Sorry, I'm an Ace fan.
There's nothing wrong with that. We're all Ace fans, right?
I'm just wondering if any of Kiss Masters were affected in the Universal fire in that 2000.
Not one, no.
They were all stored at the Iron Mountain facility when that happened. And actually, because Kiss is recorded by Mercury Records, all the tapes even before that were located in the New York facility. So Kiss was never on the West Coast. And, you know, there is something to be said about a lot of what's been talked about for that particular incident. It's astonishing how many copies of recordings were actually affected, not the originals. And pretty much a vast majority of our most prized artist recordings were already moved to the Iron Mountain facility in Pennsylvania. So a lot of it was digital tapes, which essentially I could take a CD and make the exact same digital tape again. So the media really attempted a gotcha moment that people blew out of proportion a lot more than it needed to be. So yeah, so none of the Kiss tapes were affected in any capacity.
I'd like to ask Eddie Kramer a question. How about Kiss Alive on November 9th, 1975? I heard Rock and Roll All Night on a radio station out of Davenport, and around the time they were playing and recording Kiss Alive. I consider Kiss Alive a concept album, and in fact, I think it's the greatest concept album ever made, and I want to know if Eddie Kramer considers it a concept album.
I'm not sure if we'd call it a concept album. I think Jeff made reference to the point about how the album was put together. At that time in the industry, live albums were looked upon as the, you know, not so kosher, not so great, you know, it's not going to do much for us. But I think the fact that Gene and Paul had this concept of how to do this album and make it sound as great. And I remember, here's what I'll tell you a little story about mixing process. We had finished the album, and Gene and Paul took back acetate, which is, you know, Yes, take your tape back in those days to your home, you listen to it. And they came back into the studio and both Gene and Paul said, you know, this one side we really want it bigger. And I'd already put tons of money, so we want more. So we went back in and literally remixed that whole side, and I punched the audience really hard. So from that perspective, it was a work of art in their brains that had to be right for the fans. They were delivering this product to the fans so they felt that they were enjoying it as if they were there. That's it.
And capturing the energy that the fans at that time were experiencing on stage in a live environment, just on a record in a more controlled environment.
Yep.
Any more questions out there?
I have one. We're still a little bit over a year away, but can we expect something for a live 2? There's probably some work that activities are there.
How about a question for Eddie on that? So Eddie, after this experience, are you going to work on some more KISS projects if you're interested?
I don't know, it's up to Jeff and the heavens above.
We are working on this. We are working towards figuring that out.
How are we doing?
One more game possibly, but I don't know where the microphone is.
Hello? I'm back here. Eddie Kramer, how are you, sir?
I'm still alive, thank you.
We're glad for that. A friend of mine and I always say that we believe that Kiss Alive 2 is the greatest album ever made by human beings. And I'd like to know your opinion between Alive and Alive 2, because a lot is made of Alive, and rightfully so, but I love Alive 2 so much. I think it captures the band at their zenith at that time. And how would you compare the two albums, being that you produced them, and which one do you think is better?
Wow, that's quite a leading question. I think they're both great and they stand up very well. But one has to look at the success of the first Kiss Alive album and the impact that it made. Kiss Alive 2 is an incredibly well done, well put together album. Certainly, from the point of view of their playing, more advanced, obviously. They've been playing long, they're more polished, if you will. Learned an awful lot. Is it better? I think that's really in the mind of the person who's listening to it.
I think
that's your favorite. I think that's great.
I would interject and say I think the also major difference is now you've got the songs from Destroyer, Rock and Roll, and Love Gun appearing on this album, right? And their songcraft just absolutely skyrocketed. Obviously, there's just a gargantuan amount of songs that you know are at the top of the lexicon of the band's catalog right there. So I can understand your perspective on that completely, because you know, Alive was a live version of the first 3 albums. Alive 2 was a live, you know, recording of the next 3 albums.
Well, I actually have a question if I can ask you guys. Either one of you know this, because we don't get in fights about it, but this, you know, KISS community talks quite a bit. Does anyone know why the RIAA doesn't list Alive as actually certified platinum when we know it sold millions of copies?
I wish I could have an answer for that. That is just, that's something that happened between Casablanca and the RIAA back when it happened, and I don't know what the history of it is there. Yeah, it's because I mean, in the book, there's literally a 2-page ad that Casablanca printed that says double platinum, and I'm like, how is this thing still certified gold? And the challenge today is we have to, as a record industry, we have to present documented sales on stuff pre-1991, pre-SoundScan, which was the implementation of scans of albums via barcodes and stuff like that, through a computer that can track it, you know, faithfully, you know. And unfortunately, that's a paper trick. We got to find file boxes, and if you know, Casablanca, with all due respect, wasn't the best at certain aspects of record keeping.
Even like SoundScan from like 91 or 92, whenever it started, that the album is sold like 500,000 copies or something into that. thing. So
I asked the question, you know, and I was just like, how do we get, you know, back when we were developing it, like, how do we get this fixed and stuff like that? And we were just in a situation where we don't have enough documented proof that actually puts it over the threshold. Yeah.
We have time for any more? How are we doing? Yeah, we got a few minutes. Any more? Yep. We got it.
Thank you guys for great information. It's a question from a Norwegian fan. I was born in '74 and my kiss is from Lick It Up to Hot in the Shade. That was my youth. Is there any box sets planned for that era?
Absolutely, there will be. I mean, we'll dive into all of them as we get to them. We've obviously done it. Look it up. You know, I know we've done a deluxe edition for Love Gun. That was at a time we weren't really doing these super deluxe box sets per se, so those were limited to 2 CD sets for the first albums on the first CD and the bonus tracks that we can compile. I know Love Gun, we're going to be able to do something more with it at some point, but we just have to figure out, based on stuff that I'm finding, how we're going to chop it up and do what we want to do with it. You know, because you got a life too, and you got something else special that's brewing in the middle of that, and you know, there's exciting things to come, guys. I mean, I can honestly tell you.
The first thing that you're doing is, you know, all of us want something. Cruises was mine, and a lot.
I'll almost be able to spend an hour up here talking about another story, you know, of something that's coming in the future that was just like, yeah.
But the greatest thing I was going to say is there's so much stuff that you're diving into.
Yeah, and post Destroyer is when like the visual documentation really started to take more of a form. It really wasn't still an MTV era necessarily, but you know, I think obviously in the Dress to Kill box set, you know, when the band went and performed, we're going to have a concert at Cobo Hall. They wanted to do a photo shoot at the venue next door the day before, I think it was. And then they with the intentions of shooting film of them performing, which was a means that Bill Coins needed to spread the band's awareness and their brand to the international market. Because they weren't really going out and doing international tours at this point. So that's what those 2 music videos on the Blu-ray are for Rock and Roll All Night and Come On and Love Me. And what's crazy about that is that was something that I discovered in the band's vault, which was a 16mm film print of the finished edit of those 2 songs, which have been out there in the video world. Fans have got their hands on the video quality ones, but I found these 16mm film prints of the finished edited performances of both those songs, exactly how you saw them on YouTube. And I just was like, hey, let's do a 4K UHD transfer and blow this thing out of the water. So that was really exciting when we found those assets. But anyway, sorry, a little bit of a tangent about, yes, I mean, I think I answered your question. We have every intention to review all of these iconic albums, you know, as they now are kind of getting into this 50th anniversary cycle for all of them.
I think we're going to wrap it up. Obviously, we owe both of these gentlemen a great round of applause for keeping those projects coming and putting so much care into them. Both of you, you're in capable hands. And Eddie, I hope you know this. I know Eddie said it, but when we tell you, we really mean you have been a huge part of our life. This band is so important to so many of us. You know, and thank you.
Eddie Kramer as well.
I'm honored. And I appreciate you all. I love you all. Thank you for being great fans. Peace.
Thank you all. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day.